So we just had a huge release of a game. Um, Hogwarts Legacy just came out, and I know there's a lot surrounding it, but overall, like, I want to dig into this because there's a lot of meat to this game. It's a whole lot of fun, and I kind of want to give you guys something to chew on, uh, before you get into it because, man, this game is actually decent and is at least worth a look. So, we're just gonna dive into it. We're gonna dive into a little bit of everything, um, controversy, gameplay, story, and combat. We want to make sure we have our bases covered. But I'm your host Isaiah, and this is Locked Loot.
We do not plunge headlong into folly on the orders of a single madman. Blind! Deploy the turret!
Alarm.
He's got nukes.
You're the last boots on the ground.
Position standby for defensive fire.
Jedi. Like my father before me.
D. Ding! Vex on the feed.
Attention on deck! This channel is now under military control.
Yes, I know they left me alone again, and because of it, I get to cover a new game that gets coming out because we don't need to cover Destiny. I'm not the biggest Destiny guy, as you guys can tell. Although coming uh into this recording, and and kind of getting ready to it was kind of hard because we're reading all the issues that are going on with this game. There's apparently a boycott going on. A whole lot of people talking about stuff. Just whenever Harry Potter comes up, the usual conversation about J.K. Rowling, and I am going to completely sidestep that, not to excuse any actions or anything like that, simply because that is not what we focus on. I prefer to judge art by its merit, and because of that, the whole idea of this controversy really, it's fine. It's one of those, don't support it if you don't feel comfortable supporting it. Um, I don't condone piracy, but it is an aspect you can go down. But I do have this to say, and I kind of delved a little bit into it. I don't regret getting into it a little bit. But the issue with the boycott is it seems very light-handed. The issue is this: no matter what aspect of this that happens, the Harry Potter is going to get a piece of the revenue. I mean, royalties are a thing. It may not be much, but Rowling will get a piece of the revenue. Even if you buy a ticket to Universal, you're supporting that. Hogwarts World, interacting on the website, cookie information, interacting with forums. Uh, Even this boycott itself is free advertising because no matter what happens, there will be opposition to any movement, and because of that, there will always be the people that jump on because of that opposition. Essentially, all that I see here is free advertising, free free publicity. They say publicity is never bad, especially nowadays in this like SEO driven world. You're kind of getting Harry Potter back into the SEO train. So it's kind of like a catch 22. You want to talk about how the game is controversial and you want to get Rowling back kind of under feet to the fire. But at the same time, by bringing it up in regards to this game, what you're doing is increasing SEO traffic to the game. So yeah, that's why I'm not getting into it because there's two sides to that you can take it either way. I'm not siding on either side as usual. Because it's not our realm. I fondly believe that my political belief should not come into conflict with this show. We're here for the games. So that's what we're going to look at. And so we are going to look at the game based on its merit. Merit. All right. Soapbox off. This is what happens when Chris leaves me alone because he usually tells me to get off my soapbox. Within a minute of me, he can see it coming. So you're stuck with rambling Isaiah over here. Uh, okay. First of all, the game's aesthetic, graphics are kind of they're in that uncanny valley. They're on the other side of the uncanny valley, kind of passing into the more realistic, but it's not quite there. Everything still seems kind of robotic and unnatural. Um, so as far as that goes, like graphics are fine. I think the game does look gorgeous. I love flying around, just taking a look at the views. Enemy design's great. uh, like, graphically, diverse characters, wardrobe's fine, transmog system, everything good about an RPG is kind of in this, and they kinda kept it bare bones. So, I'm aside from, like, graphics, which are easy to say, "Yeah, it's good," they're not the defining quality of the game. So we kinda gotta get into the experience a little bit. The tutorial, I feel, is so long, and I get it. It's supposed to be, like, teaching the game, and because it's a school, you get to kinda run with that where you're teaching throughout the entire game. But please give us core mechanics within the first hour of gameplay. Kinda set us free on the world at that point if we want to learn on our own. I felt like it was very hand-holding through the first few hours of the game as it's like, you go to class, you learn these spells, you do this, you do that. And I'm usually like a person that's like, quest, 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 quest. And instead, I'm like, oh my lord, just let me out. And of course, until you get into like, get your broom, which comes way later than I wanted it to. You want that broom, like, and that freedom, like, most players will want it within the first, I don't know, 10 missions? You're bordering on 20, and that's when they decide to give you the broom. Um, so the experience is kind of slow at first, but then it picks up. So it feels like, it's very slow at first, and then you're off to the races, and you get to take it at your own pace. I like that. I like that kinda thing. I felt like the, system could be a little bit shorter, the tutorial, and I hope, like, if they come out with a new game plus for it, they completely cut that tutorial section out so you don't have to deal with it. But overall, like, the experience is good, fun, like, you get the feel of that wizard, and it's a whole lot of fun. Um, as far as, like, story goes, now, Harry Potter's always been a big story thing. Everybody focuses on it, and everybody kinda treats this as, like, a happy-go-lucky kind of fantasy series. Lighthearted children with magic and everything in a magical school, and this game is a whole lot darker than I think I expected it to be, and it kinda gave me the feels of the, last half of the Harry Potter series. It's really dark. It deals with a whole lot of complicated moral decisions and issues coming around that and the ethical use of magic. So you're like, yeah, no, you dove into some territory that I just wasn't expecting. And I don't think a lot of people were expecting this. Everybody was kind of like, I kind of had the feeling that people were coming into this with this, like, yay, we get to finally be a wizard. And it's like, no, 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 no. You're a wizard. You kinda gotta grapple with what some of these spells are capable of, and I'm not just talking about unforgivable curses. I'm talking about how you use other spells, like, uh, Duputio? I can never pronounce them. It's a knockback spell, combined with, Leva whatever. I don't memorize the spell names. I save that for the game characters. It levitates characters. Um, but it combined, you're like, "Okay, one knocks them into the air, the other sends them flying," and you don't think about the ethical ramifications until you start throwing people off cliffs, and you get the characters commenting about how they just killed somebody. I'm like, "Oh, yeah, we got killed children murdering people out here." Because that's what's kinda gets lost here as you're, like, 5th year, you're, like, bordering you're that, like, 15, 16, 17 age range, and you're like, "Oh, yeah, no, there's some ethical complications going on here." Um Overall, like, I'd say, like, the ethical concerns are great. This is definitely a late teen game, so they added some complexity. I would say that it's hard to tell, like, where to put this because the story is so dark, you don't wanna send children into this, and yet they rated it T. How did it get the T rated? Is another question that I have. They definitely had to work to get it down to T rating. They gave us unforgivable curses. You're straight up murking people half the time, and like ethical considerations of Crucio in a fight. Um, it it's hard, like, the expectations was a whole more lighthearted story than it was, so getting the darker story I like it because I do like the darker end of stories, I like ethical concerns, I like the discussions of that, and the main quest line definitely gets into that and the use of ancient magic, and whether it should be allowed or what it's capable of, and whether people should use it, and I highly encourage you to at least, like, if you're not going to play the game, at least watch, like, a series of the cinematics on YouTube, so that you gotta get a feel for it. As far as the story length goes, I like it. I felt like that it's well paced. The story is well paced after you get out of the tutorial. Um, Kinda get going everywhere, and you can get sidetracked on side missions, and sometimes they force side missions, which encourage exploration, which is great, you know? Um, I felt like the game was good. It stayed just long enough, but it doesn't overstay its welcome. You get to the end fight pretty quickly. Um, I was expecting a little bit of a longer game, main story-wise, but I'm a person that mad rushes the main story on my first playthrough, so there's that. Um and so I'm like, "Okay, yeah," but it wasn't too short. It wasn't like you breezed through the entire thing. Y you didn't bulldoze through the entire thing with, Expelliarmus. I'm looking at you, Harry. Um, so you kinda get that. You get to the end and you're like, "Okay, this is decent ending. It doesn't overstay its welcome. I wish it was a little longer." It leaves you wanting a little bit more, which encourages you to go out and explore. It's good. Um the Goblin Rebellion. This is another, topic that's a landmine out here because of the issues around, Rowling's depictions of goblins and whether or not they reference, certain groups, so I'm glad they left it on the back burner. They're like, "Okay, the Goblin Rebellion is going on. Cool, and his loyalists are doing their thing, but we're focusing on you, on this story, on this adventure of grabbing stuff. Sure, you have Ranrock in the background as the main villain, but he only comes up periodically. He comes up at the end. We are going to discuss the complicated nature of this, how some goblins are on your side, some are not on your side. Ethical. We're going to leave the ethical concerns on at the door on that a little bit, which is troubling because they leave the ethical concerns of whether or not, goblins are good or evil on that, and that's the thing. I don't think it was intentional on the developer's part if it kind of gave a racist undertone, but, um, it could just because I played a darker story because I followed Sebastian's storyline to the end very quickly. Because when I started my playthrough, I heard about the unforgivable curses, I'm like, "On the unforgivable curse train." Um and then you get to the end of that and you're like, "Oh, yeah, Sebastian's not a good guy." You kinda get this racist undertone with him, and, the whole Harry Potter thing kinda does give a racist undertone, and some of the things about the Goblin Rebellion, you're like, "Mm, yeah." But at least the other time, I'm like, I haven't studied up on it, so I kinda feel like Ranrock's group is kind of a split off, because, they're called loyalists, which kind of differentiates usually a kind in the war in a civil war where some kind of keep to one side, so I'm like, they're loyalists to Ranrock, they're his men, maybe this isn't the entire rebellion that we're seeing, this is only his, like, search for this magical artifact, so I'm like, there's some complication there, but I'm glad they kinda try to leave it at the door for the most part. Kind of accept that not all goblins are evil, but, you kinda gotta fight your way through them. They definitely do that, and they're, like, discuss, like, the mistreatment of house elves, which is also good. So I'm like, overall, like, the story, they handle subject matter very well, I as well as they can for the writing that they're going off of. So it's not bad, but I'm not gonna be here praising everything about it. You definitely kinda hear some characters and your skin crawls a little bit sometimes. So you're like, "Yeah, that's rough, sure we're in the 1800s." I know they're like the 1800s, race doesn't matter, which is great. Um, but you're like, "Yeah, goblins and elves," you kinda hear the stuff they're saying about them, and you're like, yeah, not gonna listen to you, Sebastian. There's a reason I'm in Ravenclaw and not in Slytherin. Now go back to your dungeon." Okay, off of the story train because the story is a landmine, in itself. Gameplay. No, the gameplay is phenomenal. The game feels very fluid coming out of Hogwarts. You might get a little bit of a load time at the door, but then it opens up into the big world. Um, it's got a large map. I was expecting a lot smaller of a map to this game. And so because of that, I see the map at first, I'm just like, "Oh, oh, that's big. That's big." And then, I kinda get into it and kinda look around like, "Okay," kinda fly around for a minute as I'm exploring, I'm going, "Okay, so the world is packed." Um, but it's not packed like a Ubisoft game. It's full. There's enough out there to where you can walk on the trail and not find anything. But if you venture off and kinda wander around, you can find, Merlin trials or beast sanctuaries or camps of poachers or goblins, and you're like, there's enough here to encourage the exploration. And because of that, it kinda keeps you interested, you know, you get to the end and you're like, "Okay, I actually want to go out and do stuff." You're they don't have, they don't have spires coming out of anywhere, and they're not doing the Ubisoft thing. Instead, they're like, "Yeah, we'll give you flue powder, spaces all over the place so that, you know, if you'd like, you can teleport around. We're gonna keep, fast travel free and open, and go nuts." It's a game that definitely encourages exploration, and I really like that in it because it makes the game feel like an adventure game. Otherwise, it'd feel kinda like an action game. So I'm like, yes, you get that more adventure puzzle Tomb Raider vibe than anything. So I'm like, "Yes, I love that." Of course, like, the travel options in the game, when you have a big open world, you need good travel options. You have the broom, the hippogriff. I don't know why we have um, because the broom works just fine. It'll get you around pretty quickly. The hippogriff kind of responds in the same way. I haven't tracked whether one's, like, necessarily faster than ever. It's not I'm not too fond of it. Um, Give me one or the other. I'm like, I'll use my broom all day. I felt like the hippogriff was unnecessary. They kinda put it in for the Harry Potter fans to be like, "Hey, you can ride a hippogriff. Be a Gryffindor, ride a hippogriff, or be a Slytherin, ride a Thestral." I'm like, and no, unnecessary. It's a little bit of unnecessary bloat to the game. I'm like, "Ugh, okay." I get it. It can be used for overland travel, but the broom can too. So I'm like, the broom works just fine. In fact, I enjoy flying the broom more because again, the flying feels very fluid, and when you're on the broom, it's a very kind of wavy, back and forth kind of like how the brooms go. They're agile, they're quick to corner, they're controllable, but yeah, it feels really good. Um, but they feel very interchangeable, and I don't like that. So it's kind of a downside. Another downside with the brooms is they cut Quidditch. Come on, guys, no Quidditch. Really? I get it. We get the broom time trials and another mini game in there. Yeah, the game's a little bit bloated with like mini games already, you know, between Merlin trials, broom racing, beast taming, room of requirements setup. I'm gonna talk about this as far because we're still on gameplay, and I'm like, this game is bloated in mechanics. There's too much there. You know how you have the room of requirement where you're like, okay, you can put potion stations and you can decorate it and you can uh make supplies and get supplies, and you got gathering and potion making where you go out and gather supplies and make the potions. And then you have the loom for upgrading equipment. And then, of course, you have the beast den where you're able to keep beasts that you've captured and train them to get materials. And I'm just like, okay, there's a lot of bloat here that kind of seems unnecessary. And they kind of put it in to give it the feel. And I'm like, kind of makes things a little bit complicated. So I'm like, mechanically, there is a lot of bloat. I'm just like, there's too much. In fact, if they would have slimmed it down to only like cut the monsters and just kept the room of requirement, I'd be fine with that. Beast taming is not necessary. I know some people are excited to build their like little beast farm in the middle of the countryside, but I'm like, it it feels unnecessary. I didn't take part in it. You know, I did what's required for the quest and then kind of moved on. I'm like, "I don't need any of this. I don't need to upgrade my equipment. Let's just start running." I still use the potions, and I'm, like, still going, and I'm like, "Okay, yeah." Um, but yeah, I felt like the game is mechanically bloated, and there's a lot of different things to it, which adds to the complication, but overall, it still feels like a very simple game, which is alright. I'm fine with simple games. The simplicity makes it fun, and that's kind of where we get into combat in this game is a blast. Now, they were trying to go for this kind of, fluid, you know, you see the spell slinging in Harry Potter where they're just kinda waving their wands and slinging spells back at each other. So you got your light attack where you're just slinging random damage spells, and then you get your power spells like Expelliarmus, Infernio, Destructo, Avada Kedavra, things like that. Um and so you're like, yeah, the recharge on those is nice, and then the combat feels very fluid and very quick as you're slinging spells back, you're deflecting spells, you're dodging spells. They kind of took the Batman approach, the Arkham approach, and the Shadow of War approach to combat, where it's very rhythmic. Where okay, well, you get that yellow tag over your head where you can counter or dodge. and then if you perfect counter or long and have the time to long counter, you can counter attack. Uh, but it's very quick and very fluid. You're just slinging spells back and forth, dodging quickly out of the way to get your spells off, trying to break through the defenses of your opponent with your other spells. And so the shield-based system of enemies, where enemies set up colored shields based off of on the type of magic you need to break that shield to do more damage of them, flows very well because you're fighting those, and then you feel that Harry Potter combat is just that slinging and that heavy stop where a major spell is cast, and then the fight either ends or takes a second, and the damage keeps resuming. So you got like the Expelliarmus when the wand's taken out, except for this game doesn't play like your Harry Potter. When the wand's out of their hand, it's over. No, no, no. It's the wand is the hand out of the hand. They are vulnerable. Go for it. So it's very dark and very aggressive. Um, the combo depth. So how they do the combos is you got four on one side for your four spells, and you can change four slots, four groupings of them mid fight. So essentially, you've got 16 spells on your wheel in any given fight, up to 16 spells on your wheel in any given fight. And so the complexity of being able to combo those spells off as you're going, and figure out the combos, is a whole lot of fun. You know, you find out very quickly that if you pull somebody to you and you hit Inferno, you're going to deal a lot of damage to them. And then you follow up with like a Depulso to knock them back, or a Descendo to put them in the ground. And so you're like just comboing off on these people. uh, it feels really good. The game, again, combat feels amazing. It fluid, aggressive, dynamic. Things are changing. Then you have the items that you mix in, potions like focus potions to decrease your spell cooldown. Um, uh, items like mandrakes that stun and different that have different effects as you're throwing them out. Different potions that you take to have different effects. All of that adds to the complexity of combat. Personally, when I was playing this game, at first, I was not expecting this level of combat depth. I wasn't expecting the speed, and I wasn't expecting the complexity. So it took me a while to kind of grasp it, and I'm like, this game will take a bit for somebody to really master, which is why I'm like, why it's so fun, because once you have the mastery, you feel like an archmage just throwing spells out there. And that's where we kind of get to dark magic, because they let the players cast dark magic freely. We're talking the three unforgivables. Uh, Crucio, I can't even pronounce one that takes over people, and of course the killing curse. So you're like, yeah, you get these like entire like spell lines where you're just like, okay, the fight is about breaking through. Um, and then of course there's the feeling of literally walking up to a group and leading the fight with an Avada Kedavra, where you're just like you walk in, just scream uh, Avada Kedavra, and just murk somebody on the spot. Or again, dark magic combos into itself very easily. You can get upgrades in your talent tree, a very simple skill tree, so well, I'm not covering. Very simply, you just unlock additional abilities for your spells, and they're not super complicated. But they increase the complexity of combat a little bit. For instance, if you Crucio somebody and continue to hit them, there's a curse mechanic to where they take additional damage, but you spread the curse to other people, and you can get another ability that if you kill somebody with Avada Kedavra, it kills everybody who's currently cursed. So there's a lot of fights where you're like, oh, everybody's grouped up. We're gonna lead in with a Crucio. We're just gonna whack him a bunch as soon as to kind of spread that curse to as many people, and then we're gonna kill him. Very brutal combat when you bring dark magic into the fight. Combat is super brutal. Uh, because you're like, oh yeah, no, no. And it treats dark magic as brutal. Other spells, you're just throwing it out. But when you cast dark magic, you got this entire wind up where you pull back, say the word, and it just goes, and you see the effect, and you're just like, oh yeah, this is dark magic. This is unforgivable curse territory. We're not gonna. This isn't something we want to be covering. Um, but it's super useful in a fight. So I'll of course, if there's no in the game, there's no consequences to using it. So I'm like, oh, the only person who really gets punished for it is Sebastian. But he did his own thing. Play the story, you'll find out. But As far as, like, the unforgivable curse, you're not gonna be punished in combat. In fact, I just threw those spells around like they're candy. I've got one on each of my wheel. I lead into the fight. If there's too many, I take somebody onto my side, Crucio into the fight, spread it around, and kill as many of them as I can. Yeah, but the combat is dark once you unlock dark magic, and they treat it as such, but everybody wants to go in to be the Voldemort. You don't care about being the next Harry Potter, it's about being Voldemort, and you kinda get this feeling as the stories progress with the dark magic where you're like, "Is this right? Is this wrong? Is it another tool in your arsenal? Should you be using it? Is it a good idea?" And so that's very, like, a back to the story with, like, ethical concerns of magic, and they cover it very well. Overall, this game, combat, phenomenal. I can run around and get into fights in this game all day long and just throw spell after spell and finish off as many people as I can, and it's great. Um, Story is phenomenal. It covered difficult aspects. They cover different aspects of the wizarding world and hard topics. They don't stray away from that. They play into those hard topics. Uh, like my favorite example is, of course, the Sebastian questline, where you're kind of I played it as a duplicitous kinda character where I'm like, I want the killings, I want the dark magic. I was in there for the dark magic, so I'm going to egg this character on while telling the friend who's trying to temper us, "Oh, no, no, I'll take care of him." I became that, like I became that, I felt as I was getting through that story, I felt like the uh evil person whispering in the king's ear, egging him on. We should do this. We should do that. And then, of course, kind of getting the concerns of his friend to the side. And at the end, it was one of those come to your senses moments where I'm like, yeah, we did the wrong thing. Yeah, he has. Yeah, we did the wrong thing. We should definitely consider this. So it came across that way, and the story played it out very well like that. Um, so I don't mind. I overall I give the game a 8.5 out of 10. I wish it was bigger. I wish the story was longer. The combat is great. There were some visual bugs. Oh, that's something I didn't really talk about. The game was just about complete at start. You didn't have massive game-breaking bugs. You had, like, some visual bugs here and there, some stuff you wouldn't really notice, very often and can be easily fixed, but no major, like, bad things about the game other than controversy around it. It is a solid game. And if people wanted, like, the Wizarding World to get a good game, they have it, and they can build off of this. It's a whole lot of fun, and people need to play it. Um, I highly encourage people to play this game. It is a blast. Um, I mean, that's all I gotta say. 8.5 out of 10. I eh, my ranking, everybody's gonna give it an 8.5 out of 10. Um, 8.5 out of 10 is above average, not perfect. Very above average, not perfect. It is very good. Uh, I have a tendency of ranking games, I believe 5 is average. Other people are like 80 is average. No, no, no. 5 is average. 8 is not average. I give this one an 8.5. It is that good. And I'm gonna be playing this for a little while. This is a game that makes me feel like I want to 100% complete this. And maybe play it on hard mode. Maybe I'll stream it. I think I will be streaming hard mode to, like, play through it on hard mode and kind of see what it's like. I played on story. I felt like I wanted to cruise, check out the plot, and keep going. That's everything that I have to cover here. Uh we're at the end here, so you might as well like and subscribe. I know everybody says that. Follow the podcast wherever you get it. Subscribe on YouTube if you're watching this video. I'm logging out. Oh, right. My name's Isaiah. I'm your host, Isaiah, and I'm logging out.